to my younger self, I would always say like just start earlier, even though everyone is like, oh, but you started early. But I think even just having knowledge going into university, understanding how money works, understanding how credit cards work. When it came to like accommodation, I didn't get into a bad situation, thankfully, but I know people who had like bad credit scores as a result of, sorting out accommodation and people not paying on time and defaulting and things like that. So just really understanding the financial responsibility of being an adult, because unfortunately it is a big part of our lives, and it's not something that anyone is going to sit you down and necessarily tell you, okay, let's like take your notepad and your notepad and pen and start writing, okay, this is what I need to do with my budget, this is how investing works. So having that sense of ownership from an early age, I think really does go far, and it just kind of puts you above the curve and makes sure that you are in a better position financially.
Hi, welcome to Black Income Creators Podcast. My name is Max, and today I have Bukiie Smart with me. Bukiie, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Thank you, Max, for having me. My name is Bukiie Smart, and I am a personal finance content creator. I talk about money and lifestyle, and I do quite a number of things as well, like within the personal finance space, and just helping people to do better with their money overall. So I've got a podcast called the Stylist Invest podcast, and then I've also written Investing for Beginners and ABC, the ABCs of Personal Finance as well, which is my first book, just helping people to get started on their journey to personal finance.
Okay. And do you find that typically, in terms of gender, do you find the difference in terms of like whether or not you have more men or more women, like seeking out this information? I just wondered because obviously I wonder if it differs.
Yeah, for sure. I think initially it used to just be a lot more guys that were interested in money and interested in learning how to build wealth and grow their wealth and things like that. Increasingly, I've had more women actually like be my audience focus and ask me the questions. And I think I'm also pushing for that, like a lot more women to be more open to investing. Before I used to see the guys asking more like aggressive questions about investing and growing wealth, and women were asking questions about saving or debt management and budgeting. Whereas now I think more women are getting into the conversation of actually growing their wealth, monetizing their hobbies and investing as well, which is great.
Okay, so let's just go back a little bit. So Bukiie, is it Nigerian? Is it a Nigerian name? Okay. Okay, but did you grow up in the UK?
I did not. I grew up in Nigeria. So both my parents, I was born in Nigeria, raised in Nigeria, and then I moved to the UK at around 16. So it's over 10 years ago now. And I've been here ever since. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of, because you're quite young to be in this space, I mean, I say not that there's an age thing, but in terms of like giving advice and sort of having written, a couple of books, etc. So just want to take you back to sort of like, leaving school, university. What made you decide to go down this path as opposed to sort of a more traditional, even corporate path, maybe?
Yeah, of course. I think I've always like known about things to do with money from an early age. Like my parents always kind of instilled in us principles about money and money management and just being better with money. It wasn't until like I got broke in university that I was like, oh, like what does this mean? And it had never happened to me before. And I spoke to my dad about it, and I think I got that understanding from him of like, okay, you really need to take this seriously because you're going to be an adult and on your own. And that's really how I started just reading books about learning more about money management. Then I just wanted to actually figure out like how to never get broke and how this has happened. A lot of things to do with like your money mindset. And so when I left university, and my first job was like in accounting as well, and I had studied accounting and finance. And so it was very interesting because you would think, oh, your background is in finance, you know about money, but I actually didn't, because they don't train you to know about your personal finance. They train you to know about the finances of a different company or how to be a professional at work and things like that. But you're not taught about money from your own personal perspective. And so that's really what fueled my, I guess, attention in that way, and saying like, okay, I want to learn for myself. And then I was just sharing my journey online, and that's how things, I guess, kind of happened. Like people were asking me more questions about it. And then I started doing all the things that I do now.
It's interesting because there's, we've had a few accountants on here, and there's different types of accountants. And so a lot of people think of like, sort of like a strategic, they just assume that all accountants are like really strategic management accountants, as opposed to sort of like financial accountants, sort of more the bookkeeping side and the numbers side. So it's interesting to me that a lot of people have had to go on that journey by themselves. It's not something that you can go to university for in terms of learning about money. It is a very different space. And you said that your dad was the one that was kind of like, yeah, let's not do this again, let's not get back into it. Was it credit card debt? Was it sort of just managing like the cash flow of the the student loans? What was it exactly that sort of threw you off?
Yeah, it was just the cash flow of just managing money, and I got given an allowance for the month, and it had just run out like within a week or two, and I was so confused because I think it must have been like 3-4 months into my journey at university. So I was like, I'm not, I couldn't really pinpoint how it happened. It was obviously like just overspending or just not keeping a close eye on my spending. And then one day I wanted to buy something and it was like, oh, card decline. And I was like, what is that? What does that mean? Card decline. It was a very rude awakening. But yeah, my dad definitely like, let's not do this again. And my mom also started telling me a little bit about her journey with like saving and investing. And I was like, oh, okay, that's nice. Because you just think about your parents, you're like, okay, they work and they provide for you and, they give you money and they help you out. But you don't really know how all of the behind the scenes and how they also think about their finances. So I guess they started getting a lot more transparent with me the older I got as well, and things that they wish that they knew earlier, and kind of passing that on to myself and my brothers.
That's good, because I think a lot of African families, they don't, maybe Caribbean as well, I'm not so sure. I think, yeah, don't have the conversations around money early. So they'll say to you, we do not have money for this, but they won't explain to you what it is they're doing with their money until, like you say, you're an adult now, etc. So it's an interesting dynamic where you're starting to have those conversations about, actually, we had to do this when we first came to the UK because, you know what I mean, blah, 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 maybe taking that second job to, supplement incomes and stuff like that. So I think it's good that those conversations are now being had a little bit more, because transparency is so, so important. So tell me a little bit about the two books, though. So you've got the ABC Finances, did you say it's called?
Yep, ABCs of Personal Finance. So that one is just a very, I think of it as like an easy first step into your personal finance journey. And it was really inspired or fueled by just the questions I was getting on a daily basis around saving or budgeting. And I felt like people just wanted one resource that wasn't overwhelming, that wasn't like a lot of financial jargon or like a 300-page book. I'm like, okay, here's what you need to do. So it was literally just ABC, so 26 letters of just breaking down personal finance and the steps you can take with like budgeting, with credit cards, with investing, with saving, and just really putting it into these like bite-sized chunks for people to actually feel a little bit more confident when it came to their finances. And then a couple of years after, again, with my journey with investing and people asking me questions as well, I put together Investing for Beginners. Because a lot of people just didn't know where to start. There's a lot of information about investing and how to do it and all the different ways to do it. But people just wanted like, okay, how do I actually start? Can I start with £10, £50? And what does that process look like in terms of like, okay, on a practical basis, how much am I putting in every month? How do I understand if my money is going to be lost, or what's going to happen once that money is actually invested? What sort of platform is offered investments, accounts, and things like that? So just really, again, being that single source of truth where people can actually get started with investing.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I think there was a time probably about 5 years ago where you were just kind of bombarded with messages around investing, but it wasn't like the options around investing. So it was very much like it's either property or you're day trading. And I'm just like, this, one takes too much money, so you have to have the budget to do that, the deposit. Yeah, you do need the capital. And then the other one is just like, I don't know if I really want to be spending this much time learning about different companies and currencies and all sorts. It's just too much. So I think it's good to have something where it's a little bit laid out and people have options and they're like, okay, I'm not comfortable with this, but I could actually maybe
Exactly. And because it's not one size fits all as well, right? Like people have to do what works for them, what your risk tolerance is, what you're comfortable investing in. I started having conversations about halal investing, and ethical funds and things, sustainable funds. And all of those things are very specific to the individual as well, right? So it definitely cannot be like a one size approach for everyone.
Is halal investing around just products and services that are sort of Muslim owned, or is it to do with like lack of interest and sort of like the whole cycle of kind of how they are funded?
It's both. So some wanted people that were owned by Muslims, and some wanted like, okay, within the fund, are there funds specific to, that are green, that don't, invest in things like cannabis and tobacco and all of those kind of things. Some people were more interested in funds that were more companies that were investing more in like energy efficient resources, more being aware of their carbon footprint, planting, trees and all of this stuff. So, and there are companies now that do a lot of those things as well, or have a greater focus on it. So they actually now have separate segments within investing. If you had your moral or religious rights, and beliefs, and you wanted to invest, you have those options now, which is great.
Yeah, no, that'll make a lot more sense because I think people are being more conscious with how they spend and how they invest. So they want to know a little bit more about the companies that they're investing in. So I think that's where index funds, maybe people just want to be a bit closer to it, but not so much that they're, tracking everything every day. So it makes sense. Yeah. And so in terms of what would you say to someone that wants to start investing, but maybe feels like they're not in the position to?
I think it's always a tricky one when people think that they're not in a position to. I often find it as a myth that people just assume that you need like tons of money to start investing. I started investing with £10. I had just come across an app called Moneybox, and I think their whole tagline was you can start investing with £1 every week. And I was just so curious to actually try it. And I actually started seeing it grow. And because I started getting into the personal finance space and reading up more about like how investing works and understanding what that investing pound is going into, how it has grown from £1 to £2 or £1.50, I was then a lot more confident to start exploring other options, with like index funds. I started doing more research on like individual stocks. I remember at some point I was buying so much stuff from Zara, and then someone said to me like, "Oh, you would think you own shares in Zara." And I went and I checked like, can I own shares in Zara? And I realized, oh, Zara has a parent company, Inditex. So you start to think more of those things. But I would say to someone who is worried that they can't start, that you probably can. And it's just about knowing what is out there for you based on your income level. And even if you're like, oh, but my income fluctuates, or I also have credit card debt, like how do I prioritize? I always say it's still worth putting something down today for your future tomorrow, as you also work on your other financial goals, whether that is clearing your credit card, or repaying debt, or saving, short term for like holidays or other things, or paying back student loans. But you definitely can afford to start investing with a very, very small amount.
Yeah, and I think it is that sort of crux between sort of like saving and investing that people tend to struggle with. And like you say, and debt payments. So it's like, okay, I've got this £1,000 debt, I've got £100. What should I do with it? Would you be saying to somebody actually put 60 down on the debt maybe, and then take that 40, and as opposed to put all of that on the debt, and then you're left with nothing in the pot?
Yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, people who are paying, debt off, they still have to eat, they still have to feed, they still have to kind of live their lives. Like it's not this one thing where it's like you're not going to do anything else until the debt is repaid. So for me, it's getting people into the mindset of understanding that you can plan for your future as you're taking care of your present day circumstance. You shouldn't wait until everything is perfect, or you have more money and things like that, to say, okay, now I'm going to put that towards investing. You can actually do both. You can just prioritize the debt payment first, and then investing as a secondary financial goal. But definitely you should be doing investing as early and as soon as possible.
And what are the sort of common mistakes you find people making when they're looking at or starting to look at their personal finance?
I think a lot of people, one, just get overwhelmed with like all the things that you can do with your money and or what you should be doing with your money. So if you're like, oh, I'm paying credit card debt, or you're paying for other debt repayments that you maybe have gotten into, getting your credit score into a good place. People want to buy property but also are struggling to pay rent. People want to move jobs or make more money. I think there's a lot of overwhelming things, and I would say like people just sometimes need to relax and just take a step back and put some things in context. Understand what season of life are you and what should be your biggest focus. A lot of people want to do everything at the same time. Sometimes I say to people when I coach them, maybe this is the season where you just focus on clearing this debt. If you have a good job and you can actually afford to put, I don't know, 500 or so pounds towards that for 2-3 months, do that. And once that is done, then let's look at investing, or let's then focus more on like what your other saving goals should be. That's the first thing. The second thing is not automating finances, which I think a lot of people just spend without really having any control or say. And I find this when people say, oh, I don't have any money to invest or save, because by the time my paycheck comes in, it's already got into every other person's bills. And I'm like, that's because you're not prioritizing yourself or your future. And so I always encourage people to definitely automate your savings. As soon as that paycheck comes in, put a percentage out into a different bank account or a different account, and then also do the same thing for investing. And then every other person bill comes after you've taken care of yourself. And that's really the definition of like, paying yourself first, which is like a niche or a common cliche personal finance, but that's actually how you personalize it, is really taking care of your future, but then also taking care of your present day self.
Do you find, what's the difference where you have somebody, let's say, who's married or in a relationship to somebody who's single? Do you find that sort of like they have a sort of different approach sometimes to some of the things that you're saying, or?
I think so. I think when people are married or living together in a relationship, the way they see their finances um, is different because there's two rather than one. But what I would say that it's super important who you decide to be your life partner or to who you're just in a relationship with, because they can significantly affect your finances. I have coached women who were like really disciplined when it came to saving. They were on track to meet all of their saving goals, and they got into a relationship where the guy had debt and they felt obligated to like support them or to pay that up for them. And the person just kept on racking in more debt. And so they lost control of their finances because of that relationship. And it then became more about supporting him and trying to make his finances better. Whereas a single person will not have that problem, right? And so their focus is just what they're up to. And so I think sometimes people do need to always remember that their personal finance is their personal finance. Like regardless of if you're in a relationship, if you're married, or if you're single, your money should be your money to manage. Like in a relationship, you might have someone who's a little bit better at managing finances, or just a little bit more financially savvy. They keep up to date with what's going on in the economy. They know how things affect your finances. But certainly you should have confidence in how your finances are being treated, even if you're not the primary person in the relationship who is in charge of like paying the bills or looking for better interest rates, things like that. But you should feel a sense of, okay, I know what's going on and I'm confident with where my finances are at this moment.
Yeah, and I think a lot of women, let's say, who are getting divorced in their 40s and stuff, they struggle with that because it's like, I've never paid the mortgage. I don't even know what the mortgage is. They know the grocery bills, maybe they've done that bit, you know what I mean? So the sort of like daily living is fine, but actually the bigger bills, or, touch wood, someone's partner passes away and they're really lost. They don't know if there's insurance in place, critical illness, all of those kind of things. And you're like, they've never had those conversations. They've just trusted the other person, which in some ways it's comforting that you can do that. But in other ways, it's like, at least just know the numbers. Look,
I think people don't like to think about the other side of things, like, oh, well, what if something goes wrong? What if someone does pass, what if someone comes knocking on your door to say, oh, you owe £10,000, are you going to be like, oh, that's ridiculous? Or like, oh, I thought it was a little, like, how do you think about the future And people don't think about that, especially in a relationship. But it is one of the biggest things and problems in relationships is money and how that has been spent, whether it's a woman being financially dependent on a man or financial control or abuse, where people just don't have a sense of ownership in the finances of a relationship. So, yeah, hopefully, I think that we're getting into a point now where women are asking for more and also being a part of the conversation and wanting in on the conversation. So it's not enough to be like, oh, my husband or my partner manages all of our finances. It's understanding, okay, who do we pay the mortgage to? How much is the mortgage? Who are our providers for all the bills? And even though they're not paying them, but just that sense of being aware because of all the issues that have come up, with women being just taken advantage of later down the line.
Tell me a little bit about having a sort of a portfolio career, because that's kind of what you created, and how do you sort of juggle that?
Yeah, I think honestly, it's becoming familiar with the word balance and what that means in different seasons. But I don't think when I was leaving university, I sort of had an idea of like how people made money apart from just a traditional job. And just the more I also probably just got exposed, like I just started going into random events and speaking to different pockets of people. I started understanding the world of freelancers. Content creation wasn't a really big thing then, but it was probably up and coming. Couple of bloggers had started to like go full time, and then I was like, what does this mean? But also see like the way the world and the economy has shifted as well, like with advertisers no longer doing as much on billboards or TVs and now bringing that into mainstream consumer. So I just started thinking for myself, like I need to be part of this conversation. I want in on this as well, and it just made sense for my personality. Like I've never just seen myself doing one thing because I felt like I'm good at several things and good at coaching and good at speaking. And most of these opportunities, I would say, found me. I don't think I particularly set off to do anything apart from just my day job. And then in the process of my personal finance journey and being online or being, visible with what I was sharing about personal finance, it started being, okay, can I invite you to come and speak on this topic? Or can I ask you to be a keynote speaker, or do you do coaching? Do you offer mentoring? Do you have a masterclass? Do you have a podcast? All of these opportunities literally were just conversations of people in my DMs and my comments. And that's how I started getting into all of it. But balancing it can be tough, right? Because you feel stretched and pulled in different ways, and you have to decide like which opportunities are the best ones for yourself. And just because you have 1,000 opportunities doesn't mean you should take all of them. So for me, prioritizing like what are my major sources of income, and then focusing on them. Like my parents always tell me, like, don't major your minor. So if something is just like nice to have but it's bringing you not a lot, maybe 5 to 7%, don't put so much of your time into it. Focus more on the things that you can scale, that you can also do really well, and also seek help, which I think it took me a really long time to like get an assistant, because I just felt like I can do it. Why am I paying someone to respond to emails or to help me set things up? But actually understanding how human resource can really be a driving force, be beyond just someone, helping you read emails, and really valuing that a lot, especially when it came to how I was spending my time. I felt like I needed a life manager of some sort, because my instinct is always to say yes to certain things and like figure it out later. So now I have someone that can help me put things in perspective and say, actually, you don't have the time to take this on, so we're just not going to do that. And just really being like a second brain or a second pair of eyes for me. And that has also really helped me on figuring out what I need to focus my attention on based on what is bringing me the most amount of money, but also the thing that I like to do the most as well.
Is that a virtual assistant, or is that somebody that you physically meet up with? And
I've physically met her. So she is based in London. I did want a virtual assistant, but I think when I was interviewing, she came up. I think she was the last person I interviewed, and it was quite last minute, but she had everything that I was looking for, I think, over and beyond the virtual assistants. And because she does more than just an assistant role, like she really does help me think more creatively, more strategically, again, many ways manages my life. So I really, really, value and appreciate her and just ability to get someone and not feel like I'm doing a lot of things by myself, because that was never my goal. But I also know that by myself, I just tend to do everything, which is not sustainable, especially once I got married and just with like seeing friends and spending time with family and all of that. I was like, yeah, I can't do this myself anymore.
When you started out, what was the reaction of friends and family to your journey? Because I mean, like you say, it's not the traditional route. Most people are like, oh, you studied accountancy, so do you want to work for one of the big accounting? But that would be the normal kind of expectation, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now I still have a 9 to 5 job in tech, so I should probably caveat and say that. So I do that for most of the time. And then, but what I made clear, I guess, from the beginning was the kind of person that I am and that I do other things. And so when I was seeking out a job and also switching from accounting and finance to tech, it was very important that the person or the employer that I was going to be working for knew that they could trust me to manage my time, and I have my deliverables. And if I meet that, anything outside that is like up to me, right? And so for my family and friends, I think, especially my family, they were assured in the fact that I was going to be smart and I wasn't going to, although I am like a high risk taker, but I also have parents who were like, you can take risk, but you need to have calculated risk and, look at both sides of the coin. Um, and so I think that has also kind of given me the confidence to be able to make certain decisions, but also to help me think big as well and not just be confined to one thing, but understand, okay, you can make money in 9 to 5, but also build your investment portfolio, but also work on monetizing the skills that you have, whether that is speaking engagements or coaching or doing master classes and things like that. So, and now even like brand deals. So I think them having that perspective made them like a little bit more comfortable. So yeah.
And okay, so in terms of like the transition that you just talked about, you said you went from like finance to tech, and then obviously still doing the personal finance stuff. Was there a reasoning behind that in terms of like, I don't want to be doing finance 100% of the time, I need to break this up a bit, or was it because something completely different that you just left tech?
No. No, I don't think I knew that I was going to end up in tech. I think it was more, I don't want to be in accounting and finance. So I had done the accounting role, then I went to a more financial advisory role, and I was doing personal finance. So it was a lot of numbers. As much as I'm like a numbers girl and I'm very like data analytics and driven that way, I just thought I need to feel my creative juices as well. So it started off with just a long list of what I don't want in a job. And then I started literally just interviewing everywhere that I thought was interesting, I could fit my personality, and also just asking friends for recommendations. Like, oh, what do you think like I would be good at? And seeing what they said, and literally saying, oh, you think I'd be good at creative strategy? Okay, apply for a job in creative strategy. Oh, you think I'd be good in marketing? Apply for a job in marketing. And that's how I kind of filtered down and actually got my role. But yeah, it was a big transition, right, from just finance and numbers and accounting to a more creative role within tech. So I do product marketing, which works with the product team on one side, but also the marketing team. I get to do a lot of like strategic things, but I also get to do numbers and think creatively about a strategy and then execute it. So that I feel like was something that I didn't know until I had it. I just kind of thought about the kind of lifestyle and also the career that I wanted to have. And it was about just like plugging and playing and seeing what worked. So, yeah.
And one of the things I'm hearing is like, the importance of networking and talking to people about it. And I think one of the things that we've come across is that a lot of people don't talk about their personal finance. Some because there's some shame. It's like, yeah, I've got £30,000 in debt or whatever. And some just because families have never spoken about it. So how pivotal has the networking been for you moving?
I think so important. Absolutely, so important. I think people shy away from conversations that make them feel uncomfortable or just where they don't feel like they have much to add to the conversation. I run towards those things because I think that there is strength in knowledge. And so I've always been open-minded as well to learn different things because I've also seen my parents go through their personal finance journeys. They've they were always like career people. And then later they started investing in like businesses and wanting to start their own businesses and things like that. So they've always kind of raised us to be open-minded about just being comfortable with what you don't know and actually trying to find out what you don't know and if that can be beneficial to you. So for me, like my network, invested in the network, going to different events, speaking to people is something that I was kind of raised to do. And so now I do it a lot more confidently. Of course, there's still times I walk into spaces that I've never been to and I get, shy or nervous. But I always remember that to get to the next level, even just for my overall life experience, it always helps to meet other people. And I've met so many incredible people who I have a lot of things in common with or who I've just learned a lot from. It's not always seeking an opportunity like, oh, I want to meet someone who's going to help me to go into real estate and, build an investment portfolio that way. It's just being open about, oh, what is the deal with this person or who are they? And if there's a way for us to work together, great. If they become my friend, even better. If they become a business partner or introduce me to opportunities and for me to grow wealth, then great. But definitely, I think in life, everyone should just be more open-minded into growing their network and not just staying in the confinement of what they know or who they know, because then you're only going to grow like as that network grows, right? So if you only stay with the same group of friends that you've had through high school, through university, or in a church, or your family friends, you're only going to grow in the same way as those people. Whereas if you have a lot more exposure, then like your growth is exponential, right? So that's also how I think about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't. So I run a networking event, and what I see is a lot of people come to the event, and it's very much what's in it for me. And if they don't have that instant gratification, and they lack curiosity about other people, so no event is a waste of time. You might go there and you'll be like, oh, no, it's not quite what I thought it was going to be. But then, you might meet someone who has a really interesting conversation about hiking, and then you end up, joining a hiking group or whatever. It literally. But if you go into networking with a view of like, well, what's in it for me? How can I make money from this? Sometimes I think you miss the real opportunity, which is the sort of the connections. And so I think that's really critical in networking, that people don't do it with just one, like very focused. I need to make sales. I need to make that. They need to be thinking a bit more broadly around networking. And then in terms of coaching, sorry, you guys say something?
I was just going to say, I was just going to say, even with networking, sometimes I find that the people who do the events often sometimes have to understand that if people are coming to this, if they're coming by themselves or they're typically like shy introverted people, it helps them if the speakers or the people in charge of the event also kind of give them prompts. So whether that is breaking them up or encouraging them to speak to someone new, or some
icebreakers,
breakout activities,
something,
those things really do help.
It is tricky, and the more generic a network is, the harder it is to do that, because people literally are coming from different walks of life, and you're like, okay, this one's literally just stepped out of university and has no work skills whatsoever. The other thing is, a lot of people go to networking events and they're looking for a job, like any job. And you're like, they don't know how to like brand themselves properly. So they turn up and you're just like, what can you do? Oh, anything. And you're like, I need a little more than that. You're going to have to like give me some context and stuff like that. So I think there is a struggle. I think how people network and is a tricky balance, I think, for a lot of people. What motivates you typically? Like, what do you find are your motivators?
I think so many things. Like, definitely my family motivates me. I think we're like a family of the high achievers, overachievers. And so I've always been motivated because the entire family is always doing something really cool. Money motivates me as well, just because I think it's a tool that helps me get to the life that I want to live, but not just for myself. There's a lot of like, philanthropy things that I would love to do, that I just think money is the way to do that, or the way to get that as well. So a lot of what I'm driven by, especially, last couple of years in my 20s, is just understanding that as the seasons change, money becomes increasingly important, not just for yourself, but also for your family, and building that generational wealth, but also your community. And using that to kind of set yourself up and set other people up for success. I think I'm motivated by life and just like the possibilities of everything that you can be and do in life. And I think that really gets me up excited most days, because some days I'm like, why? But yeah, that's pretty much it.
And another thing is, I think families have a money value, and they may not realize that they have it until they start dating. So you might think, oh, I don't have a particular relationship with money. And then you meet somebody who's got an opposite or a terrible relationship or a good relationship with it. You're like, geez, my relationship is whatever. So I know you're married, but like when you were dating, did you find that to be something that you struggled with, like other people's relationship with money?
Yes. So my husband and I were together from like just after I graduated from university. So we were both like babies when we started out. At some point, I was like, okay, my mom was like, oh, maybe you should start dating other people just so you see what's out there. And I was like, Mom, I'm like, she was like, don't just put all your eggs in one basket. And I was like, this is a good thing. Like, I'm very responsible. She was like, well, just have some fun. Like, go out and see what's out there. So I was like, okay. So yes, it's very interesting when you're dating and when you are especially thinking long term, like, okay, what does life look like? And if I want a life partner, what are the things that I would want them to have? And people just always kind of take for granted, like, oh, money or their salary. But for me, it was more so like thinking about how they thought about money, whether it was making money, saving money, spending money, their background as well. So understanding their parents or how they were raised, like if money was a taboo topic or if they talked about it, if they felt like they were comfortable, with money growing up, or if their parents like never had enough, because those things start to show up in a relationship, whether it is that the person is a little bit more controlling about, your spending, or they just want to save everything, or their mindset when it comes to making money is just like stay in a stable job, like don't take any risks, don't start your own business. So those were like the nuances that I actually started to pick up, like speaking to other people. I think ultimately I married well. My mom was so happy.
No, I think you're right. It's that thing of it's the nuances around how their relationship with money may then impact on you. One of the things I find is that a lot of people count somebody else, like they count what they contribute to the relationship. So they keep score. That's it. Not count. They keep score. So it will be like sort of like, well, I bought, I bought the first 5 dates, you know what I mean? I paid for the first 5 dates or whatever, you know what I mean? Or, I'm doing more of this and they're not really contributing this and they don't, that's just how they are. They kind of whatever. And so they can end up being quite resentful if they think that you're not doing the same thing. So I think having those conversations early, but I think that's obviously something that you talk about in your coaching with your clients is around sort of like their relationship with money, but also whoever else is in their space. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I also came up with these conversation cards for money as well, because as soon as I got married and a few of my friends started like dating seriously or getting engaged, and they were wondering like, okay, what sort of conversations did I have with my husband before we got married, especially to do with finances. I even just friends, like different friends were going through different life stages and transitions. People were having kids, people were getting married, people were deciding to move to like Dubai or to the US to do a master's or things like that. So it started to be like, okay, how do we ensure that we're able to have these healthy money conversations? And so I decided to literally just write one day all the conversations and questions that I asked, and then I put them in a card format that people can now use as like prompts to make sure that you are thinking about those things outside of just like, oh, he has a great job, or he has great earning potential, whatever that is. Right.
And
So,
also, I think
yeah.
some people use dating as a means to fund their own cash flow. So, like, just to be there, or as a means to get out of debt. So they'll be like, yeah, if he's got money, then my debt problem will be solved. So then they don't tackle their own debt, their own debt situation. How do you work with people who need to get out of debt? Because that is a very specific part of personal finance, which is a bit, it's not as sexy as and exciting as the sort of investment side that people want to get into.
Yeah, for sure. I think credit card debt or just any kind of debt can be a very lonely, overwhelming, and stressful journey. Like, I always find the people who are mostly financially overwhelmed is usually because they have debt. Most of it has actually been racked up either through buy now, pay later, which I've seen more on the rise, I think, post the pandemic, or people who were trying to pay back credit card debt from like being in university and overspending and things like that, or getting into a situation where they spent a lot, but they thought they were expecting the money back, and then people couldn't pay it back, or family had taken on some of some money from them, and then now they were using their credit card to kind of fund their lifestyle as a result. So it can be very complicated, very nuanced, and extremely personal. But I think for me, I always think about like getting them to a point where they don't see their debt as like a problem, and it's not this thing that is happening to you and like the world is over. It's about okay, taking control of it and feeling confident in paying it off. So I've seen people who are like earning six figures still struggling to pay debt just because the way they were budgeting for life was just misaligned priorities, right? They just didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to look at it. They just thought if I don't see it or do anything for it, it will go away, which never ever happens. It almost ends up being more expensive, right? With the APR and the interest that comes on that debt. So for me, the biggest part is always just aligning your priorities, whether that is that you have a job and you can actually afford to pay down the debt and making a plan for it. Because a lot of people just be like, oh, I'm going to pay it off at some point. But it's like, okay, what is that point, right? Do you want to be paying off this debt for the next 2-3 years if you can actually afford to pay it in 6 months? And people don't have a clue of like what exactly is going on. They don't understand how the interest also rises. Like you borrowed or you took out 5K in credit card, but now it's jumped to 7K or 8K. They don't understand how that has happened or why it keeps going up. So just really breaking it down to them in a way that is manageable and in a way where they feel like, oh, okay, I understand why I should pay this off first because it's taking on a lot more interest the longer I sit on it, and then figuring out a work backwards plan of how can I actually pay it off, like within a timeline, whether that is 6 months or a year or 2 years. And also another thing that I do is also getting people to actually speak to the debt provider, whether that is a bank or a facility, or just maybe if it's someone that you owe money, and actually making a better payment plan. Because I think a lot of people just say, this is what I've been given, this is what they told me I have to do, and I'm just going to do it. A lot of the time, more often than not, people are reasonable to say, okay, let's adjust this so that it's more manageable for you. Of course, like certain financial services provider, they make money through them, accruing the interest, right? So it feels like a conflict of interest. But if you are willing to say, I cannot afford to pay this much every month, can I reduce it or can I extend the payment timeline? More times than not, they're reasonable and they would say, yes, sure, let's do that for you, because we also want to help you out as well. So
you touched on it briefly around sort of black tax thing, where people are sort of giving money to family and stuff like that. And we talk about this all the time on this podcast because it's a massive issue. But I mean, a lot of people I've been speaking to are, sort of like 30s and 40s. So is that something that you're finding that the sort of in their 20s generation are struggling with as well?
Yes, for sure. I think I've seen people who have to hide the fact that they've gotten a better job or they even have a good job from like their family so that they wouldn't get taxed, or they wouldn't get, oh, you have to send money or you have to start paying the bills. There was someone who had been working in investment banking, which pays quite a lot, but he was in credit card debt because he was sending so he was spending so much money on his family because they were like, oh, you're a banker, you have all this money. Here's what needs fixing in the house. Here's what you need to do for your sisters. Here's what you need to do for your mom to help out at home. And it can be very stressful. So a lot of the time for me, I have to be very careful because it can be very sensitive. Like on one hand, people do want to be able to speak to their parents or speak to their family to say, my finances are my own. It's my personal finance. Here's what I can do. But they don't have language, right, to be able to say that, or they don't feel comfortable in pushing back when it comes to parents, or people feel a sense of obligation, or my parents have supported me. They, they sent me to great schools. I am where I am today because of them and things like that. And so they feel this obligation to whatever they say, I will do for them, even if it means I end up in debt. But it's like, okay, no, you have to take the reins back of your own life and actually become a little bit more financially confident, which includes putting boundaries as well, on saying no, on knowing what you can do, because you can afford to help out sometimes. But other times, if you're struggling in debt, or you're even struggling to just afford your own lifestyle, you have no business taking on debt for your family. And then they expect you to kind of pay it off because that is your duty as a child. Like, it just doesn't add up for me. And even when I have spoken to parents on the other side of this, sometimes I would do like a coaching with the child and the parent. The parents don't want the kids to suffer for their mistakes, right? And the parents sometimes are ignorant and say, oh, I thought you had all this money and I thought you were good and I didn't know you were struggling. And so it's also bridging that gap knowledge-wise to say to the parents, like, hey, your child is going to end up in financial ruin if you keep putting them on all this pressure and all this financial responsibility. And they're still the parents at the end of the day. So they also need to take back their own responsibility and not use their kids as a pension fund, right? Which I find that happens sometimes as well. So it's tough and it's tricky, but there's definitely like progress to be made there.
So in terms of save, spend, invest, just tell us a little bit about how you work typically with people around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of different things that we do, but primarily, I guess, we're like a personal finance educational platform, just try to help people to save better, spend well, and start investing or continue investing. So we have the social media content that we do, just educating people on things that are going on and making them feel more confident with all the things to do with personal finance. Then we have like masterclasses and things that we put on every now and again, or we'll do like lives and webinars. We have a podcast, which I haven't done for a little while, but I definitely want to bring that back. And then we have like the resources as well, where we have the cards, the conversation cards I mentioned earlier. We have the books. We're also working on a couple of other resources, free and paid, that people can always just get on. But I think my mission has always just been to especially help young people get it right from an early age, so that people are not going into their 30s, 40s now trying to make up for the years that they lost where they were a little bit financially responsible. Because if you're in your 20s or in your peak earning years, or in a position where you don't have a lot of responsibilities, you're doing well, or you have the means to even think about, okay, what are the different ways you can make money? It's easy to just spend all of that, so just focus only on spending, and then you think, oh, I'll start investing or thinking about buying a house in my 30s. But life doesn't often happen that way. So for me, it's all about educating people, making sure they're confident to be able to handle their finances long term.
And what are your goals for SSI? What are you planning to do with it moving forward? Because it's still young.
Yeah, it definitely is still young. So my goal is to really like build out, I don't know if you've seen like the masterclass.com, where there's a bunch of speakers who are selling the expertise. So to do that, but to also like have that with live events, and to also work with schools, I think is a long-term goal of mine, is to somehow get personal finance into the school curriculum, whether that is education at a younger level or maybe university or something like that. So I've done a couple of like speaker engagements and like book tours with some universities, but I definitely would love to scale that at a larger impact, to say like it is mandatory that before you leave university to go and start working and earning money, you actually understand how money works, you understand how personal finance works, you understand the reality of actually being an adult, of which money plays a big part. So yeah, that's just some of my goals.
And one of the questions I had was about sort of what financial advice would you give to your younger self? Is that kind of linked to that, what you've just talked about?
Yeah, for sure. I think to my younger self, I would always say like just start earlier, even though everyone is like, oh, but you started early. But I think even just having knowledge going into university, understanding how money works, understanding how credit cards work. When it came to like accommodation, I didn't get into a bad situation, thankfully, but I know people who had like bad credit scores as a result of sorting out accommodation and people not paying on time and defaulting and things like that. So just really understanding the financial responsibility of being an adult, because unfortunately it is a big part of our lives, and it's not something that anyone is going to sit you down and necessarily tell you, okay, let's like take your notepad and your notepad and pen and start writing, okay, this is what I need to do with my budget, this is how investing works. So having that sense of ownership from an early age, I think really does go far, and it just kind of puts you above the curve and makes sure that you are in a better position financially.
Yeah, we're and how do people typically reach you? I know you've got a lot of platforms that you're on, but what's sort of best way to reach you?
I think usually DMing me. I'm really great with DMs. A lot of the time I actually like just have conversations with people in the DMs that either might progress to like a coaching call, or I might say to them, you can probably buy one of the resources that we have, or you can just look through the content. Maybe I just give them like a bunch of things to start with, and then they're like, oh, this answers my question, thank you so much. So I think DMs are usually a great way, and then if I need to like put you like say, okay, send an email or book a call with me to have, then we usually go from there. But yes, Instagram and TikTok are usually the best places to reach me.
And is it your full name?
It's Bukiie Smart, yes. So BUKIE SMART on TikTok and on Instagram. Instagram, you can also reach me on Save, Spend, Invest as well. Bukiie Smart normally covers like everything to do with just life as well and money, but either of those two, I'm open to getting DMs from.
What's Bukiie short for?
My full name is Bukola, or Oluwa Bukola, so that's my Yoruba name. But everyone calls me Bukiie, and my mom started calling me that since I was 1. So I guess that's what I've always just been.
Oluwa Bukola. What does it mean?
It means God has given me more wealth, which is very apt, right? I came into my parents' lives and they came into just more wealth and more abundance. So yeah, not surprised at all that I'm the manifestation of my name.
And then is Smart your married name or your
my maiden name?
It is your maiden name. Oh, okay.
Yeah, my married name is Sulaiman, but I think I liked Bukiie Smart so much I kept it and then added his name on it.
You hyphenated. You're like, yeah, it's there.
He's added to my life. I don't need to drop it. So yeah.
No, but also Bukiie Smart, Book Smart. It helps. It's very on brand.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
You can.
It's like a doctor. Build my whole personal brand. Exactly. It's my whole personal brand. It makes sense.
Oh no, that's really sweet. Well, thank you for this conversation. I think it will help people sort of think about things a little bit differently, and if they need the support, they know how to get hold of you. But I think, especially at those younger ages, it's good to be having conversations around money. I think a lot of people, they don't have those conversations, and so what they do is like they sit at home, they worry about the debt, they stress, they don't enjoy their lives, and then one day they're really in crisis, and then that's when they're kind of. Do most people find you when they're in crisis? Is that typically when people are like, yeah?
Yeah, most people find me in crisis, and I wish they wouldn't. I would rather start just people just understanding their personal finance, and even just understanding like it's okay to enjoy your money, right? Part of this conversation we didn't have was enjoy your money. Like money is a big tool for me to do what I love, which is traveling, and do that as many times as I want, because it's important to me. I don't spend on Ubers, eating out, all of those things. I spend a lot of money just traveling, and I find that when people come to me in crisis, they can't think of how to enjoy their money. They just want to clear the debt, or they've gone above their budget, or they've gotten into an overdraft, things like that. And I'm like, no, like let's do this from just, okay, I want to be able to understand my overall personal finance, including spending well, including investing and thinking of my future, including today's, financial goals, whether it's saving for a holiday, or saving for a house, or saving to buy a new car. Just wanting to make sure that you're financially confident overall, I think is where I would love to start people's journey with them, rather than at the end where something has happened and you need support.
I think travel, again, it's a form of networking. It's like you go traveling, you meet people, you have conversations, and it inspires you to do things differently, and it motivates you in a different way. I think people sort of think about traveling as going to look at a bunch of buildings perhaps or whatever, and they don't think actually out here I'm likely I could bump into people, whatever. Where's your favorite place to travel?
I think it changes. I think last year I would have told you like New York and Barcelona were my favorite cities. But then I went to Budapest that I've just absolutely fallen in love with. Then I went to Croatia, which I'm like, there's a lot. But I think a lot of these places are places where they stood up for me, either for the memories or like speaking to people like you mentioned. Like I met a woman in Milan who just really encouraged me, or I met a guy who I do a lot of solo traveling as well. So whenever I go solo traveling, I'm always open to speaking to people and networking. And I met a guy who was, I think, 28. He had built this like tiny tech business and like sold it to Google and was now like soul searching. And he was so young, but he had so much wisdom to just download and just live life. And it just really like inspired me. And so I just love those like opportunities. So key places for me are like either core memories with family or where I've met someone and like really gotten inspired, which is like New York for me, or places with my husband that I was like, I would love to go again and again and again, because it's just like a great town, great people, like Croatia, Budapest. So yeah.
We didn't talk much about property, but would you buy overseas? Did that sort of thing? Because I'm that person that goes on holiday and like within about 2 days, I'm looking in the estate agents. I'm like, I could live here. And then after a week, I'm like, hey, I'm done. But, I do get that thing of like, I want to buy overseas, and I get really inspired to.
I think on my 21st birthday, I had some of my friends come to Madrid, and then they left, and then I stayed for like another 3 or 4 days in an Airbnb. The person who owned an Airbnb, we spent the entire 3 or 4 days every night talking about real estate overseas and how he had started his journey. And so it definitely is in my plans as well. And I'm still in touch with him to be like, okay, one day I'm going to buy a house in Spain, in Madrid. But yeah, I think also the more you know and you learn, the more you see what is out there and what is possible. Like you don't just start thinking, oh, everybody just has money. How do they build their wealth? It's all these different things, right? Having holiday homes that you can Airbnb when you're not there, but then when you are there, it works out great for you and your friends, and you want to be able to do these things for your friends and family. Like I'd love to take a group of my friends and family just on holiday and just have them just come there, like flights paid, everything paid. And then you start, okay, how do I actually put that in place? So it's by investing and saving and, managing money well. But yeah, travel definitely helps me to dream bigger for sure.
That's brilliant. So we look forward to seeing where you go with the save, spend, invest, isn't it? Yeah, I always mix the two S's. Like, which one do I say first? Which is why I ended up with like SSI.
Yeah, I call it SSI all the time, but when I say SSI, people are like, is it saves? I'm like, just call it SSI.
Yeah.
It's like great.
Well, because SSI is like the disabilities thing in the States. That's why I was like, oh, let me say SSI. Do most of your clients come from the UK, or are they sort of more from Africa? Where do you find that you get most of your clients?
They're more UK. I think this year it's expanded a lot more, I think, because of TikTok. So I have people messaging me about from Germany, Australia, Nigeria, the US, Canada. It's really diverse. So now I'm like brushing up and like, okay, how do things work in other countries so that I can actually support them well? But lots of money management principles are the same across board anyway. So it's usually fine if it's not specific. But yeah, it's very exciting. Speaking to people in different countries.
And it's interesting because that just touches upon the sort of content creation. So you can be a personal finance person and like only provide personal finance in a very sort of dry, traditional way. But with content creation, it's delivering it in so many different ways. So it could be books, it could be, like you say, TikTok, etc. How do you manage that? Because that's quite a creative endeavor. That's not the dry.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just like my creative expression as well. So I'm glad that people find it like useful, but I always say like I give advice or I talk the way that I want to receive things or things I wish that I could tell myself. So oftentimes people would send me something that I've said and I'm like, oh, that really encouraged me, or that just, gave me a new perspective. So I make the kind of content or express myself the way that I am also receiving it, if that makes sense. So
you are your audience. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it helps me not to like feel burnt out or feel really stressed by it. It's just something I really love to do. And then I'm really grateful that like other people enjoy it as well. Thank you so much for having me.